So tonight we're going to talk about like lockdown drills in early care and learning facilities. And the subject came up and struck a lot of interest with me this year. The first situation was in social media in June, and it came out of the States, where a mother found her 3-year-old daughter standing on the top of the toilet seat. And at first she thought her daughter was kind of playing around because she's quite a joyful, playful little girl. And then she asked her what she was up to, and the daughter replied that she was practicing lockdown and that you have to be very quiet. So the mom was quite floored at that moment and a little surprised, and eventually came to the realization that her daughter had no concept of the gravity behind her role playing and was quite heartbroken by it all. So she ended up posting the image and a little bit of a call out to politicians on Facebook, and that's how the whole thing went viral. And many of you probably saw it in the news. And that just really, I don't know, resonated. Like, I had a lot of questions about that. And then last month when Emily and I were on our provincial tour, and we were visiting a branch and having a meeting, and we were having all sorts of discussions, but the topic came up how one of the staff was concerned because they had done a lockdown, and then one of the children didn't want to come back to the preschool because the child felt quite traumatized by the lockdown drill. So we looked at this topic, we had some discussion about it, and I chatted with Rika, who is going to come up next, and she's going to talk about some of the things that we had discussions about and give you some ideas. And we'd love to find out what everybody's doing out there and what you're doing and what you're not doing and why or why not. So Rika and Glenda, I would like to open up the call to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sean. So I think that Glenda and I see this more as a discussion of some questions backwards and forwards.
Absolutely.
Sean had contacted both Glenda and I a little bit ago just to see, what we knew about lockdown procedures and what was happening. So I had a bit of a conversation with Sean then, and that's when she thought it might be helpful to have us as part of this great way of staying in touch throughout the province. So I think for both Glenda and I, we both work for Vancouver Coastal Health, so we're certainly not speaking for all the health authorities throughout the province. We're just speaking for Vancouver Coastal Health and what our experience is like here. So if we go back to kind of the basics of what the regulations say about emergency training and equipment, the one I think that people have down pat pretty well is around the fire drill systems. You practice fire drills at least once each month, and that goes off without a hitch and what have you. But the second part of it is that, so part one, you haven't got the regs in front of you, so I'll just tell you, you need emergency exits in a fire drill system approved by a local fire assistant within the meaning of the Fire Services Act. B is you need to have an emergency plan that sets out procedures to prepare for, mitigate, respond to, and recover from any emergency. And then what you need to have is you need to practice implementing the emergency plan at least once each year. So it's kind of separate from the fire drill system. Fire drills, yes, down pat. The other one is about plan. And I think when Sean and I were talking, we were talking about that's going to look very different as well throughout the province, as what is an emergency that you need to plan for in the north of BC may be very different than what we plan for down here in the south. Earthquakes, tsunamis may be here, but not elsewhere in BC. So it's really specific to where you are and the situations that you face. So for us, most people focus on earthquakes, right? Earthquake drills.
And then I think too, I think Rika and I will probably kind of tag team a little bit as things come up and conversation is going. I think, you also need to look at sort of the more northern rural areas. I mean, just looking at the fires in Fort Mac in Alberta last year, that's kind of probably a focus more than the earthquakes that we sort of look at in, sort of the lower mainland areas.
So it's going to be different in different areas of the province. So the one that you're talking about, I particularly want to focus on tonight, is being prepared for if you need to lock down the childcare facility. So in Vancouver, one of our operators, Vancouver Society of Children's Centres, has got a lot of childcare centres in the downtown core. So they got a lot of practice in emergency preparedness, and lockdowns were one of those things that they did. And it's happened in other centres as well, where there have been situations that centres need to be able to go into lockdown mode. I think what Sean was talking about was, and the child being not understanding what was happening, and another occasion where a child was too scared to come back to daycare and felt traumatized by the whole event, is the most important thing is that the staff know what they're going to do. The staff have a really, really good understanding of what they will do if this situation happens, if that situation happens, so that you feel confident, or we feel confident when something happens. We know what's going to happen. We're there for the children, for them to be calm and to feel safe. So for something like our lockdown, and we can talk about what that might look like, you may not actually need to practice lockdown drills with the children. You may need for the staff to be really cognizant of what to do and how to take the children into a safe room within the center or whatever it is, but you may not have to actually practice the lockdown with the children. Does that make sense? Of course, everybody's on mute.
That makes sense.
Hey, this is like a whole new experience of I've done when you do this before and you don't have, everybody's on mute and you have no idea if they're looking there totally blankly or what have you. Gwen, did you want to add anything to that about the need to actually practice? Or?
No, I think that's absolutely correct. And I mean, even with fire drills I've had in the past where children, sometimes during an inspection, and not recently, but, years past, that, well, I don't like to do it because the children are scared. So I think it's all about communication with parents. These are the policies and procedures that you're going to have in place. Speaking to the children that, this is something that we need to practice just in case. And, I don't think it's benefit to actually make a game of it, because it actually could be quite serious, but just to sort of portray it that this is what we do if this happens or this happens. And I know, Rika, you and I sort of spoke about, or you did, about sort of a tabletop exercise.
Exactly.
And I think the key thing is having the staff well drilled in what would happen in all kinds of situations. And I mean, people can do this in their staff meetings. You might want to take one component of perhaps an emergency preparedness issue that may or may not occur, and just what would we do in this situation, so that everybody is really confident that they can actually take care of the children and, of course, themselves in any type of an emergency situation. And a lot of communities, most communities, have an emergency preparedness plan. I would encourage people to contact your local emergency preparedness, or through the fire department or the police department, and resources that are local, like what do they have to offer. They might offer training for specific daycares. I know that, in the Lower Mainland there's huge effort and interest in that, of course, because we're a lot of people that live here. And for instance, the North Shore Emergency Management will do actual sessions for people that have childcare programs and sort of walk people through that. So I think that's really encouraging. There's also a lot of documentation regarding preparedness, safety preparedness and those kinds of things, and pamphlets and what you need to have on hand. And the legislation does require that you need to have supplies to care for children. The lockdown is somewhat different. I completely agree. And you know, I think it's definitely worthwhile speaking about at a staff meeting, or to have people confident in who's going to do this. Where would be the safest place for you to take the children in a lockdown situation? There are some programs in schools and they have their own particularly policies, so make sure that if you're in a school or a public building that you know what their program and plan is as well. I think that's all that I can sort of add to what you were saying, Rika.
Well, I suppose there's, if we go specifically to a lockdown, then the what you'd want to look for is exactly what you would do if you needed to shelter in place. So supposing you needed to shelter in place because there was some, because of fire, that maybe you need to shelter in place as opposed to leave because of the smoke, right? That might be something that you need to do. Or there might be a chemical spill that you're much safer to be in the building than to be evacuating the building. So the procedures that you would follow for shelter in place would be the same procedures that you would follow for a lockdown, right? And there's, and I sent it to Sean. We have a booklet that BCH provides called Prepare to Care, and she can probably send it out to you. And that talks about the things that you would need to do to shelter in place. Would do similar things if there were a lockdown. So you set your policy and your procedures as to what you're going to do, and then, as we've said, you need to feel really confident that if something happens, you're going to be able to follow through on that. So one of the ways of meeting the requirement for the regs to practice implementing an emergency plan at least once each year would be decide to do something like a tabletop exercise, and somebody develops a scenario. So, and you could get an outside person to develop a scenario so that none of the staff know what it is, and then that scenario is delivered to the staff, and you have to figure out what it is that you're going to do. So if it comes as a surprise, you're going to be that much. It's the same as when you have a fire drill and nobody knows that the fire drill is going to happen. It feels a little bit more real. So you can do that without involving the children in it at all. And then maybe, the same as you start to practice fire drills, you walk through it, you do it slowly and gradually. And maybe you do it with the children, and maybe you don't do it with the children. Maybe you do this something that you're just feeling very confident about doing it yourself. But the tabletop exercises are a really, really good way of testing yourself.
And I think, too, one of the key things is to have some type of communication that you can, you know, call 911 if there's a situation where you need
and that's in the Prepare to Care. That spells out all the things that you need to do. So you choose a room in the childcare center where you are going to have access to communications equipment so that you can contact emergency services. You choose an inside room, you know, one with as few, no windows if possible, as few windows as possible, so that that is going to be a secure place. And so the Prepare to Care leads you through those things as well.
You know, as Rika said, we're speaking from Vancouver Coastal Health perspective. I would encourage people that are not in the, you know, in the Vancouver Coastal Health realm to also connect with your licensing teams and your licensing offices in your areas and sort of see what they would recommend as well.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
That would be great.
I'm wondering, this is Emily here. When we were talking out in the communities, and it was quite relevant for me when I was working in Prince Rupert, where one of our programs was actually situated within the school. So the requirement to practice with the children came directly from the school or from the school board or the principal of the school. And so I know that when we were talking to a group on our trip, this was actually an issue because the school was making a requirement that the children go through this process, and that's where a lot of the anxiety was coming from the staff who didn't feel that they should have to do that. So I guess my question is have you had the same kind of similar issue come to the table, and if you have, how have you addressed that with programs that are in the school system?
That has not been an issue that's come to my attention, Emily, at all. I mean, the thing would be to talk to the school board, to talk to the school personnel about how you make that work for preschool children. Right?
My experience, and lockdown was not really anything that we sort of looked at years ago, to be perfectly honest. But my experience sort of in the interior and in northern BC with licensing was that when there were programs in the schools and there's a fire drill with the school, the preschool or the daycare was notified, and then the children did participate in those sessions, but the staff were actually alerted to this as when this time is going to happen, so at least they were prepared, and then the children would go outside. And you know, we always encourage that staff would speak to children about, you know, emergencies are when you really need to listen, and this is what we do. And then it was practiced when there wasn't a school fire drill. I think they did that. I don't know that they were monthly. It would depend. But you know, the daycare programs and the preschool programs would practice monthly on their own as well.
I think it would also be important to talk with the kindergarten teacher and to work with the kindergarten teacher.
This is Charlene. Oh, sorry.
No.
Could I ask a question on the same line?
Mm-hmm.
So we, unfortunately, in our community over the past 2 years have had instances where the public schools needed to go on lockdown for the reason that there was a person that may or may not be coming into the schools that should not be. Now, where I work, one of our centers is within walking distance of 5 elementary schools. We were not notified. And that has become a big gap in the system. And so while we're trying to work person to person with that, is there something that maybe licensing, or maybe it's not that capacity, but another agency where we could maybe make it more known that when you have childcare programs in your community, they should be in the loop for those kinds of things?
And that's a really, really important point for sure. And that would be then done at the local level through whatever, if you have the early childhood tables, ECD tables, where the school board's sitting, the municipality is sitting, childcare is sitting, so that you start working on some coordination for things like that, for sure.
Definitely, and I also think, you know, going along those lines too, Rika, that, you know, if you make connections with the local RCMP, that might be the people that would notify the schools and the emergency rescue services of the fire department to make those connections if you don't already have them, and say, you know, we need to be included in these decisions and be notified. That's a really good point. You know, when the schools are notified but the daycare isn't, and the children could be outside and at risk, you definitely want to mitigate that, you know, those issues for sure.
You know, we in one instance we did that, and what we were told was the school districts have a very strict protocol. So it's almost like one person calls and then the protocol set in place for every school. So they don't have time to call us, the schools don't. And the RCMP are saying, well, we need to get to where the action is, so they don't have time. I think you're right. I think, you know, I agree with you. It's an education piece.
Yeah.
And maybe we just need to do a little bit more work. But I hadn't thought about putting it up at the ECD tables where they might be a little bit full. So maybe that's a good point. That, you know, at our next meeting, I might bring that up, because we can do only face-to-face.
Yeah.
Exactly. And even your local municipalities as well, because they're the children, you know, like your city or your district or whatever, you know, make those concerns known. Even your MLA. your provincial and federal partners that, we're a daycare, we need to be included in these things, and maybe they can put some, sort of, I wouldn't say pressure, but recommendations to sort of local areas where they will be able to facilitate that. But definitely starting at the local tables, I think that's a really, really good point. I happen to be going to the North Band sort of North Shore Childcare Planning meeting next Monday, and actually I think I might just put this on the table because the school district is there and see what is going on for letting our programs know if there's an issue that needs to be, concern needs to be brought to the daycares that are close in hand.
It happens when you think about it, even in school. Sometimes a childcare is located in a school, and unless there's a good relationship between the childcare center and the school administration, sometimes communication doesn't work that well about what's happening. So it goes back to those relationships, right? Try and strike them up with the school board, with your neighbor schools, community centers, same thing. Unity.
And I also think it's really, sorry, Rika.
Go ahead, Splenda, sorry.
I was going to say I think it's also important to have conversation with your parents too, so that they know what you're doing in your centers in order to mitigate any emergency, or specifically in the lockdown program. Like, I was quite shocked when my oldest granddaughter was in school and I get a call or a text from my daughter saying, oh, they had lockdown at, Haley's school, and it's disconcerting because it's not something that, typically happens every day. And there have been serious incidents in recent history that we do need to be looking at this.
And Glenda, I think that what you're saying is absolutely right, and that goes to having really clear policy and procedures. So when you set your policy and procedure about what happens if there's a lockdown, part of your procedures speak to communication with parents, right? Because you do what to do to prevent it, what to do when the incident's happening, and then what to do afterwards. So that is all part of that policy, is what do you do afterwards? How do you let the parents know? How do you debrief with the children? Those sorts of things become really critical. And then you revisit the event and see if there's anything you would do differently next time.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions about the lockdowns, or are there questions generally about emergency plans?
Emily, we see your hand up. Did you have a question?
No, sorry, that was from before, and I asked my question.
Okay.
Well, it's Charlene again. You probably think that we live in a horrible community, but we don't. But we've had, so we're talking about threats, I guess, for lack of a better word, from external threats. So you would have to lock your building down. We've also had, and I'm sure many other centers have, where the threat comes from within, meaning an angry parent, or in our case, we had a parent who came in and who was high and posed a physical threat. So we've had to set up like some internal emergency procedures where we had a safe word, where if someone said this word, you knew they needed help because we didn't want to escalate. But those are like really difficult things to set up. It would be so nice to have some, maybe a little bit more guidelines around that, because we think we got our bases covered, but it's a hard one to kind of prepare for every scenario.
And you really can't prepare for every scenario. There's always going to be something that's going to be a surprise, right? But if you can be as prepared as possible for the most likely, the scenarios that are going to happen, then what you do for those scenarios can so often be transferred to something else. So, the idea of the safe word, and typically that happens when you know that you have, for instance, supposing you know that, and the most common one will be something around custody, right? When you know there's going to be issues around custody, then have a plan in place that all the staff are aware of and understand, so that you do have that safe word if somebody comes in. You do have a plan as to what you're going to do. It's all about being prepared. It really is. So good that that's happening out there.
I think too it would be really good to look at, and maybe ECEBC might want to take this on, is looking at some sort of a fact sheet, things to consider in certain specific situations. You could also do it with your own group. Have a scenario every staff meeting, or look at those kinds of things and have discussions, and then it brings more awareness. And maybe have parent meetings. These are the things that we're looking at, hopefully not ever to experience, but this is what we would do in this situation. And definitely I think following any incident like this, well, they probably would want to send one of those incident reports to your licensing officer, but just sort of have some debrief after, which I think is really, really important. And debrief and communication, it's all about connection and communication with your families and your colleagues as well, following anything hopefully that we're not going to experience, but just to sort of put that out there.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. This is Friday. Sorry if I am asking a question that already got covered. I keep losing my internet connection over here, but I was wondering if it's common or required that public schools practice lockdowns.
That would be a decision that each school board's going to take. They're all going to have their own, and I'm sure they all do practice lockdown, policy and lockdown procedures. Yeah.
We had a 7-year-old at our program this summer. She was kind of a past participant, but school was out, so she was with us. But normally our group is 1 to 5-year-olds, and she kept wanting to play lockdown with the children and like teach them what to do if a bad person came, and we kept shutting it down and not allowing her to do that. It seemed really inappropriate with our group, and the location of our program is, I would say, extremely unlikely to have this kind of threat, although not impossible, of course. And I was shocked. I was shocked that she was thinking about lockdowns, and that she like clearly felt it was so important to teach these 1 to 5-year-olds about what to do if bad people came, and she was using the language of lockdown, and we had to stop her several times because it just seemed to be really on her mind.
No, I think that goes
happened for her as well, that it was so much on her mind.
Yeah. I think that goes along with the situation that Sean spoke about with the little girl standing up on the toilet or whatever. Different children take things in themselves, and it appears to me from what you're saying, Friday, is that she was probably somewhat traumatized regarding that, which is kind of interesting and definitely important. And maybe I think the post trauma, because I would say that, I mean, even in my situation here, if we had a lockdown in our office, there would be some part of post-traumatic stress following that, I would say. So, these people are young and they're little, and they don't possibly completely understand the whole impact of what that means, even though they do feel that they need to be saved. So it would be interesting to see if they had this lockdown, maybe it was a practice, how that was explained to the children in her situation in the school system or wherever it was that it happened. It would be certainly worth looking into a little bit. And reassurance, right, Vika? Like reassure the children that this is going to be okay. I think that's
like I say, may not be something you actually need to practice with the children. If you're in a shared building, then you're probably going to have to figure out how to do it. But if you're in a standalone building and you're somewhere where it's, not likely to happen, staff need to know what to do. Staff need to know where the safest place is in the building to take the children to. Staff have a responsibility for that, and then staff have a responsibility to make sure that the children feel safe.
And on that, Rika, we have a question from one of the callers who asked, so the staff could practice a lockdown without the children at a staff meeting possibly? Can you just go over the tabletop one more time quickly?
What would happen with the tabletop is you could get somebody to develop a scenario. So you could get somebody to just write up a scenario. For instance, center receives a phone call from police gunman within 3 blocks. You must lock down. That's all you need to put in. And the center staff are going to have to figure out exactly what they're going to do. We just had a phone call saying we need to lock down. There's a gunman within the next block or so. What am I going to do? I mean, even as I say it to myself, I can feel my heart rate start to escalate, and I'm sitting here in my office with not a child or anything inside. So you kind of think, okay, if I can feel that here, imagine what that's like if you actually get the phone call. So if staff can practice that, okay, so what would we do? Where would we go? Where's the phone? How do we close the drapes? Is there a room that there's no windows? So you start, that's what you need to figure out.
Lock the doors.
And like I say, go to the Prepared to Care. It's got a few really good pages. Yes. How you shelter it, and rather than me telling you over the phone that you're not going to remember, that shelter in place, that lockdown procedures, it's got lots of good information in it as to what you need to do. And you need to kind of do it specifically for your center because each center is different. Laid out differently, your the weak spots in the center are going to be different, the secure spots are going to be different numbers of children, different age ranges of children. So, but it's going through that exercise of figuring out, well, what is it that we're going to be able to do? So it's the staff confident, really confident. Do you want me to add anything to that, Sean?
No, I think that's quite fantastic, and I think it's such a good activity to do with the staff. I mean, you can learn so much every time you do one with a different scenario.
Yeah, so it could, yeah.
Go ahead.
You could do one then about fire. If you think of the fires, could do one about losing power. Windstorms, the power's down, trees are down, parents aren't going to be able to pick up their children. What are you going to do?
And recently on Vancouver Island, there was a caregiver who was injured.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Exactly. She was by herself, and the police came and provided wonderful care. So there's endless scenarios you can work on.
You know, I also have to thank you. I did an orientation for people that are interested in providing childcare on the North Shore this morning, and because of this topic this evening, in my presentation and referring to the emergency, annual plan to mitigate a large emergency as opposed to sort of the regular fire plans, I talked about lockdown, and it was really, really interesting. I said these are things to consider. So thank you, ECEBC and Sean and Emily, for sort of bringing that forward, because then this is good education to people that normally it's not a topic that we generally speak about.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so important. I have one more question from a caller that I wanted to put out. I think it's more of a comment than a question. And it says, when we practice with our preschoolers, we focus much more on the procedures to follow when they hear the teachers call for a red code or a yellow code, more than going into the details of the reason. So that's an interesting way to deal with it, because you're effectively doing something, but you're not creating the possible trauma from, acting like it's a real type of event. Does anyone else have any questions or comments that they want to put out there?
I do. This is Friday. Okay. So I don't know if this program still exists, but there used to be Neighborhood Watch program, at least when I was a child there was. So at my program, we're in a house in a residential area, and we have the next door neighbor, and all the children have a relationship and know who that neighbor is, and they're kind of like the same neighbor. Like if there was an emergency or something, that person would, like the next door neighbor would be the first person who would kind of either come to our help, or if the children needed, for some reason, the staff were sick or hurt or something, you know that that's the friendly neighbor, safe person to go to in an emergency. Is that, like, what are the thoughts on that?
Well, all centers need to have access to somebody. If there's only one person there, there needs to be somebody that you can get hold of really fast as an emergency contact, and that typically is a neighbor, right, that would be able to come and support you and step in. So that would still be absolutely true if it's, if you're just one person. And good that the neighbor knows that, and the neighbor's willing and able to help support the center, or for the children to go and get the neighbor. That's great.
Yeah, and I think that's a good lead into summarizing some of the takeaways for tonight. Is, one, knowing your community, knowing your neighbors, and having those community connections, whether you're in a school, a community center, building those relationships. So in the event of, a traumatic event, that people are going to connect with you and let you in on, what's happening. As I think of Shar speaking about not being told what was happening in her community. Also, just be prepared as staff, have plans, build communication and connections with parents, the children, and each other, and the community. And the final piece that I really like, again, is the tabletop, and I think that's just a brilliant way to handle it. So we're going to wind down, and I'm going to thank you, Rika, and thank you, Glenda, for a fantastic program tonight. I really appreciate you coming on the call and sharing your wealth of knowledge. And I'm going to pass the call over to Emily Malechko.
Thank you.
Hi. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes just to give you a few key updates around the work that we've been doing on the 10-a-day child care plan that I think people would be interested, specifically since we're entering into a new political season with the election being called for May 2017. So ECEBC is currently working on a 6-fact sheet looking at how the 10-a-day plan, if and when it's implemented, will actually impact the early childhood educator and their programs themselves. So specifically addressing lots of the questions and the issues that have been brought up and what this change would mean for early childhood educators, and that should be released by December, I'm anticipating. And then the week of we are also in support with the Coalition of Child Care Advocates developing a week of action the first week of March. So this will give opportunities, ideas, and strategies for early childhood educators and others within their communities to take some action throughout that week. So some centers have said that they want to actually do a stance where they are maybe refused service, and others have also spoke out about doing other things, having key fact sheets so that they can speak to parents about the importance of having a system here in BC, getting in touch with media, newspapers, local radio, meet with the current MLA and all of those that are running within their regions and their areas to ensure that childcare shows up as a key issue at the next provincial election. And so those are two of the key things that we're working on right now to keep the momentum going, to get people signing up on the website, to be a supporter of the plan, and to continue on. And so if any community is interested in having a presentation that hasn't had one recently, that's something else that we're also able to offer. So I'm going to pass it on to Christine because she's going to talk a little bit about our online learning.
Okay, thank you, Emily. And Christine Buffs is going to give us an update.
Awesome, thank you all. And thank you, Sean, this is Sean's first night on the call, so congratulations to Sean for managing to find her way around the new software. So we all need to take a few risks now and again, and that's great to see. So there were just a couple of updates. We're really excited from the education side of things that the online learning courses that we've offered with Red River College have been really successful. We had over double the amount of individuals sign up that we expected for both the positive guidance and the play session. So we will be starting a third one in the spring, and that's about the brain. I'll be posting some information up a little bit later today, and that will start on February 23rd, so you can look for that. The other thing that I'll just remind you, in case you haven't seen it, is that we do have a call for proposals out with regards to ECEBC's conference in the spring. The deadline is early December, and that call for workshop proposals is on the homepage of ECEBC's website. So we'd love to see more applications. If you know of anyone, or maybe this is the year that you're going to step out of your comfort zone and develop your first presentation or a new presentation. So we'd love to see that happen. I think the other thing just to note is that it is National Child Day coming up on November 20th, so we invite all of you to share what's going on in your communities. If you've got events or other things going on, we'd love to be able to share those province-wide.
Thanks, Christine. Now we're going to open the line for questions or comments. So does anyone have anything they'd like to ask or share?
This is a time you can ask for resources or sharing from your colleagues.
Hi, this is Danielle.
Hi, Danielle.
I am a part of the Strong Start in the Hudson's Hope School, and we are maybe like we're only seconds away from the main highway. So when you go through to Fort St. John, there's Chetwynd on the other side, so we're in between there, and we also link up to the Alaskan Highway. So they do lockdown up here. As a part of the Strong Start, I'm only in the mornings. They did the lockdown in the afternoon. My daughter and my son are 9 and 7, and they talked about their lockdowns. As a parent, I feel it's necessary because we are close to the highway. And my husband is an RCMP member, and I found that he wasn't involved with their lockdown with the school. So I agree that there needs to be communication, and communication on from the principal to my end. I seem to be at the end of the school where I feel I'm not a part of the school, so I can take onus in that as well, knowing and that there needs to be that communication, which is a big link, community-wise. As far as the RCMP, as far as the fire department, we are a very small community, and we are a very close-knit community. So I understand, and I hear a lot of the concerns as well. So I'm really great to be a part of this. So thank you to ECEBC for putting this on.
I have a question, Sean. I'm wondering if it would be all right if we got some minutes maybe from tonight that sort of talked about some of the things that we learned from Rika and Glenda, just to sort of jog our memory, because I'm planning a staff meeting in January. I've been inspired by what they said tonight, and I would just love to make sure I captured it all properly.
We will be putting it
What
online.
What did you say the question was?
No, I was just asking if we could have a summary of tonight in writing somehow, because I was really inspired by what you said, and I wanted to have a center staff meeting. I want to make sure I don't forget anything.
Oh, I see. Well, we can, I think Rika already sent the Prepare to Care publication to Sean, and that can certainly be shared. It's not copyrighted or anything for just Vancouver people, so that might be helpful too, because it's got a lot of good ideas.
Yes, so I will send that out to everyone tomorrow. And also, Shar, we will be posting it on the website as a YouTube, that you'll be able to listen to it. So that should go up in a week or two.
I didn't know that.
Our last call was up online as well.
Thanks.
Good. That's great.
You're welcome. Anyone else out there? I'd like to say hi to Catherine in Cranbrook. We didn't get to acknowledge you earlier, but we see that your microphone wasn't working. So thanks for being on the call tonight. Any last thoughts and questions?
Thank you for inviting Rika and I.
It's been great.
Thank you, Natalie.
This is such a great idea. Province-wide teleconference. Lovely.
It's so much fun.
ECEBC rocks.
Able to talk to so many people at the same time.
I heard Natalie was trying to say something.
Yeah,
Natalie?
actually, yeah. I just wanted to share something about National Child Day. Sometimes, we tend to think that we need to do something really big. Well, for National Child Day, the two of us that work at Wee Ones and the children, we're just looking into stories, sharing stories with the children about children from different parts of the world, just to understand that they don't all live the same way as the children from Wee Ones. And then as staff, me and Melissa, we did a little bit of an article and are sharing it in the newspaper to let people know that it is National Child Day, and we did point out that a little blip about the 10-a-day plan in there. I will send it to the ECEBC website, but I just wanted to tell you guys we did something, and we're going to have a little party on the 21st.
Awesome.
Those are great ideas, Natalie. I really like the stories about children in different countries.
Well, the one thing that a lot of the kids are hearing about are the issues that are happening in British Columbia with the water, right? And because we're part of Salmon Speaks, they do know the story about how the salmon can't go up to Columbia, but they also know the story about Lalou Island up in Prince Rupert area, and so water to them is really important. And so we focused on a few stories about water, and we talked about children in different countries of Africa, how they have to walk a long ways to get water, and we bring it back to Canada, because there are places in Canada, maybe not right where they're living, but just a little ways away where people don't have clean water to drink. And they have a chance to talk about it. So I think if they have that opportunity to learn, but also to talk about it, then it doesn't add to the fear of everything else that they might not understand.
Thanks for sharing that, Natalie. That's fantastic.
You're very welcome.
And just wanted to say hello to Sharon. We also missed you earlier, Sharon. And I've got a few things that I want to put out there. Our next call, all members call, is going to be Thursday, January 19th, and we haven't decided on the topic yet, but I would invite anybody to send in ideas around what you might find interesting as a topic. So please either call me or shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. And I want to let people know that we are going to be starting a newsletter, and you should expect one in your email shortly. So thank you, everyone, for a fabulous call tonight. Some good questions, and thanks again to Rika and Glenda. And
welcome.
I'd like to thank everyone for your patience with me tonight. A few little technical difficulties getting started, but the call happened, and it was excellent.
And Pro-D certificate, Sean?
Wonderful. Yes, I will be sending out Pro-D certificates. So if there is more than one person with you tonight listening to this call and participating, please make sure you send me their information, their name, so we can get that out to them as well. Okay, anything to add, anyone?
This is Barry.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. The National Child Day, there's free downloadables you can get by going to the United Nations site, coloring pages and booklets and things that are really useful.
Yes, they've got some fantastic resources. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks for doing this. This is awesome.
Pardon me?
I said thanks for putting this on. That's awesome.
Oh, great. Well, it's nice that you could be with us.
And just a reminder, we've got the website up in front of you. You should be able to see that now. So all of the upcoming educational events are available, and you can upload your events as well if you want to share them with other members. So this is a tool available to you, and you can see there are a number of things coming up, including the call that Sean's just mentioned. So please refer people to that, and thanks to those of you who are uploading your events.
Okay, well, certificates should be out in a week or two, and I will definitely send out the document that we were speaking of earlier. I'll send that out to everyone tomorrow, and watch for your newsletter, and I hope that you'll all join us on January 19th.
And Sean, I was just going to say, if anybody has any questions that come up afterwards, they can certainly contact Glenda or myself. You know, if you listen to the call and then it's like, oh, really? What was that? So I just do it directly, more than happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Rika.
I agree.
Okay. and Glenda. Okay.
Thank
well,
you
thanks,
for including
everyone.
us. That was great. Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.